What up, y'all? Chris. Talked about last night's UFC 143 post thoughts. Not really going to talk about the whole event, just pretty much the main event, co-main event. Don't really have a whole lot to say about the rest of it. I talked about it last night on a Science Science radio show, which is actually why I'm a little bit late with this video. By the time I got in last night, my radio show was about to start, so I didn't have time to shoot a video. And after talking about it on that, I didn't feel like doing one. So I know you're probably thinking, why aren't you getting ready to watch Super Bowl? Because I don't care about Super Bowl. I'm not really a big football fan, and definitely not a fan of either of these two teams. That'd be an understatement. Let's just say that. But anyways, as far as the fight last night, for myself personally, as a fan, big disappointment. Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz, two of my favorite fighters in the sport. Nick Diaz number 1, Carlos Condit top 5. Expected a war, based on these guys' style, based on everything leading up to the fight, based on what they said they were going to bring to the table. I expected a 5-round war of attrition, just toe-to-toe battle. Didn't get it. Carlos Condit wasn't having it. In a way, Carlos Condit fought the way, it was a smart decision to fight the way that he did. He had a strategy, he had a game plan, he stuck to it. He never allowed Nick Diaz to bait him into his type of fight, even though Nick tried all the tricks in the book, talking shit, putting his hands down, doing what he does. Carlos Condit never got away from what he planned on doing, and it worked out for him in the end, whether I enjoyed watching it or not. But in a way, like I was saying, Carlos Condit fought the way that I thought Donald Cerrone was going to fight against Nate Diaz, or should have fought to win that fight. So, being as Carlos Condit and Donald Cerrone both trained under Greg Jackson, I'm not entirely shocked by the game plan that Carlos Condit went with, but I was surprised. That said, as for Nick, man, I see a lot of people thought that he won this fight, deserved to win because Carlos Condit was running the majority of the time. Nick was pressing the action, trying to quote-unquote make the fight. I scored it for Condit. Thought he won probably 3 rounds to 2, just because although a lot of his shots that he landed, those kicks and whatnot, weren't very effective, he was landing a lot more than Nick. Not a lot more, but he landed more than Nick. But more so than anything else, he pretty much made Nick ineffective in Nick's strategy or his game plan. Nick throws a lot of punches, usually lands a lot of punches. That wasn't the case here. Not only did he not land a lot, he just didn't throw as much, and that's because he wasn't getting the ability, he wasn't getting close to do so. Particularly, go watch the 4th round. Nick was just following Condit, just chasing. Wasn't even throwing. It's one thing to not be able to land shots, but when Nick's not even getting the chance to throw, that's when you know things aren't going his way, and that was certainly the case in the 4th round, and probably the 3rd round to a degree as well. Nick came back, had a good 5th round. Obviously got the fight to the ground. It looked like he was going to hit that rear naked choke. I was pretty damn excited at that moment, but it was too little too late. Carlos was able to survive that, and then there just wasn't enough time left for Nick to really secure anything else at that stage of the fight. But, yeah, it was a good strategy by Carlos Condit, but it's just one that I didn't enjoy watching as a fan. I watched it at the sports bar, probably the most packed I can recall off the top of my head that place being. Definitely fans were excited for this fight, but I don't think that they enjoyed it all that much either as well, and that's not to take away from Carlos Condit. He did what he needed to do. If he had fought Nick's fight, he probably would have lost. Not to say for sure, but more than likely. So, if you're a fan of Condit, why give Nick any chance to do what he does best? And Carlos Condit didn't. I imagine that Greg Jackson told Carlos Condit, anytime your back hits the cage, get the hell out of there. Because anytime Carlos Condit touched the cage, it was like it was electrocutional fence or something. He was off of it, and he was swinging around, getting back to the center of the cage, or kept cutting angles. So Nick, a few times when he got Carlos to the cage, he tried to tee off, but didn't really get to it as well. You saw that Carlos is probably the better, naturally gifted athlete, quicker, was able to stay away from Nick. Also probably stronger. When Nick would get him in the clinch, he was really not able to hold him there at all for very long. Unsuccessful with most of the takedown attempts. Nick Diaz, one thing I'll say about this, although he's a much better fighter than he was in the past, he's never improved on his wrestling or takedowns. And it's something that I wish he would have worked on because he has a great ground game. He's gone away with that, the last handful of fights of his career. He's pretty much content with just beating guys up on the feet. But he still has a great jiu-jitsu submission game, but he doesn't really have the takedowns to get the fight there if he needs to. And we saw that was very evident in this fight, at least up until the 5th round. So that's something I think he should still work on, still can improve on, definitely. Wrestling / takedowns to get top control or back control and work on his ground game and his submission game, which is very, very, he's very adept at. Anyways, it was a close fight. I suppose probably 3 rounds to 2, but I do think that Carlos did enough to win it. Once again, I just didn't enjoy the fight. Maybe my expectations were too high for it. Maybe it's just because I expected an all-out war, and that's not what I got. I couldn't appreciate what was going on in there, but I just didn't enjoy it as a fan myself personally. From what I expected or anticipated to be one of the best fights in recent memory in the sport. And I don't think, even if you enjoyed the fight, I don't think you could pretty much say it definitely wasn't nothing to write home about. It definitely wasn't the barn burner. But congrats to Carlos Condit. One more thing about Nick Diaz in this fight, though. His biggest issue was he did a terrible job at cutting off the cage. If you're a fan of boxing like myself is, when you're facing a fighter that's moving and running a lot, a lot of people say Carlos Condit was running. To a degree, I do believe he was. But it's not like he was just running and not doing anything. He was throwing out those kicks. And, occasionally some spinning back fists, elbows, flying knees, whatever, high kicks. But I do think Nick was trying to make the fight, press the fight. But Nick's aggression was ineffective. There's a difference between effective aggression and ineffective aggression. For the most part, Nick's aggression was ineffective. And he did a bad job of cutting off the cage. Like I was saying, if you're a boxing fan, you got to learn how to cut off the ring so that the guy can't keep moving away and circling. And Nick just did a bad job of that. He wasn't really able to trap Carlos Condit very often in this fight. Not nearly enough to have a lot of success that he needed to get the decision. So I don't see how 2 of the judges get the 5th round of Carlos Condit. I guess that's my only real complaint with the judge or with the scoring of the fight. I thought Nick clearly won the 5th round. Probably, I think maybe the 2nd or the 1st. I don't recall exactly. Only got to watch it one time live when you're at a sports bar surrounded by drunk people. It's kind of hard sometimes to fully analyze and get a good grasp of what's going on inside the cage. But ultimately, I think Carlos deserved to win the decision. And now he gets GSP next. And I really don't know what the hell's going to go on with that fight just yet. I can't really break it down at this point. It'd be a little early, too. As for Nick, I couldn't really hear what he was saying in the post-fight interview. I guess he said he was going to retire. He thought he got robbed. He ain't going to retire. I'd be shocked if he does. Like he said in the Countdown show or the Primetime show, if you love something, you got to hate it. I think at that moment he hated it. He felt he got robbed. He'll be back. He should take some time off, though. Not like a whole lot, but just 5-6 months and come back and fight one of the top contenders at welterweight. There's a lot of them out there, so a lot of interesting matchups for Nick Diaz to be made at 170. And it's not to say just because he's not fighting GSP next, that doesn't mean that he won't be fighting GSP in the future, possibly next year. Only other fight I want to mention, Roy Nelson for Fabricio Verdum. Definitely the best fight of the night, or the most entertaining fight of the night, in my opinion. Who would have thought, a heavyweight fight that went the distance would be the most entertaining fight, or one of the most entertaining fights of the night. But Fabricio Verdum looked good in the return to the UFC, much better than he looked in his last fight against Alistair Overeem. Roy Nelson, if nothing else, the man is tough and can take a beating. Particularly, a lot of guys can take a beating, but to be able to take a beating at heavyweight, where the guys are hitting you, hit much harder, big ups to Roy, especially after taking those knees in the first round, man. A lot of guys would have buckled under those knees, the ones to the body and to the head. So, hell of a fun fight to watch, though. Obviously Verdum looked good. Roy Nelson, I think Dana White's got to respect him after a fight like that and the loss to Dos Santos. Maybe Dana doesn't respect the shape he's in or certain things about him personally, but any man that can take those kind of ass whoopings and keep going and go the distance, I got respect for him, and I'm looking forward to watching him fight in the future. So that's pretty much it, though. What are your guys' thoughts on the event? What do you think about the event, whatever. Mostly just about the Diaz-Condit fight. How'd you score it? Do you think Condit deserved to win? Do you think Diaz deserved to win? Do you think Condit was running? Or do you think he was fighting smart? Do you think, just give me any general thoughts about the main event, about the Diaz-Condit fight. Whether you hated the fight, whether you loved the fight, whether you hated the decision, whether you loved it, whatever else. That's it for now. If you want to hear my thoughts on any of the other fights or the entire card, or just more in-depth thoughts on this fight, you can check out Science Bites Radio Show last night. Link in the information part of the video as always to the podcast or whatever you want to call it, as well as a link to scienceofviolence.com, Twitter, Facebook page, all that stuff. That's it for now, though. Till the next UFC predictions or MMA predictions, whatever's coming up, I'm out.